Hey there, it's Will. Today on Continuing the Conversation, we are talking about application of Amos. How do we get anything out of this letter, this book that was written from this man who was writing to a specific people in a specific location in a specific point of history? And so today we are looking at a social post from one of the members of Calvary Mercer, and how she is applying that personally to her life, this first chapter of Amos. Well, good day to you.
Yes, good day, sir.
We're in our new studio here. Very fancy.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
If you have any abilities to build a studio background, contact us.
Yes. Down below.
Down below. Send us a note.
Thanks for joining me, Greg.
My pleasure. Thank you.
It's always very nice to be with you.
Yes.
We started Amos this past weekend.
Yeah.
How'd it go?
Well, it was, I feel like I really learned a lot.
Yeah?
Yeah. I had said a couple of weeks back, like on Sunday morning, how many know, you heard of the book, how many of you know anything about it? And
You couldn't raise your own hand?
like, no, yeah. And I read it a number of times, I'm sure. So, especially since we had the rain out, and so I recorded it for the video, and then we did it twice live here Sunday mornings. I feel like I learned a whole bunch.
All right.
So it was good for me.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was good for other people. We had I don't know if you saw, I think you did, but I asked Jeannie if she'd be okay if I shared.
Oh, good.
I got permission.
That's good.
But did you see her post?
I did. It was about her application to maybe how she treated people when she was younger, that kind of thing. Yeah, that was excellent.
I know. Isn't that great?
It was.
I love that. If you're watching and you have thoughts like that, during the week, social's a great place for that. Let people know what you're learning.
You just drop it on the gram. That's all we're asking. I'm hip.
It was on Facebook.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I thought maybe we could just kind of. I was gonna read it to you, and then maybe just jump off from there. Okay,
Good. Sounds good.
So it says, our church started a new book of the Bible today, Amos. It's almost like dun dun dun. We can't believe we did Amos. There we looked at nations receiving judgment for their cruelty, and I was forced to ask myself if I've ever been cruel to another. Initially, we may think that we haven't, since we haven't murdered anyone. But did we ever put someone down as a means to get into the cool crowd? I have. I'm thankful that Jesus forgave that along with many other sins as well.
Yeah. Isn't that great?
That's awesome.
It is awesome. And I was a little embarrassed that I didn't kind of make that kind of obvious observation. But I was so grateful that she did in there. I hope more people see it. Maybe after this hits, it drops and millions watch. I'm sure. Hopefully others will begin to make similar applications.
Yeah. So now the passage that we covered talks a lot about nations, especially nations that aren't the promised, the covenant nation of Israel. And so is that fair to make like a personal application like that? Or are we only supposed to read it like this is just talking about other nations?
Yeah.
You can't do that.
No, I think you can do that. So I do think there's this trend, what is this passage speaking to me? These kinds of things. And you could go down this path where you're not even being faithful to what the text is about and the main point of the passage and all that stuff. And so I think initially you want to start there, who was it written to? What was it written for? What was it trying to accomplish? Those kinds of things. But then I think part of that, that meditating on, I think we were talking about a Wednesday evening. So you may not, I don't know if you were there, but with the meditating on thinking about it, applying it to our own lives, I think that's what Jeannie was doing there really well. Was okay. I'm not a king. I'm not a queen. I haven't run a nation, and I never treated people in this way as the king or leader of a nation. So is their application to me, and that's where kind of she went with that, which I thought was excellent.
Yeah, yeah. I really like it because especially on social, you can. I think be many, including me, that would read this and think them, like, this is a message for them, those nations that don't know the Lord, those people that don't know the Lord, and God's coming to get you.
Absolutely,
and that's the way easier application to make, but the way less helpful one.
Yeah, we like to make applications for other people.
Yeah.
And this is saying it to you. And one of the things we'll see as we move into chapter 2 of Amos is sort of the way that all of a sudden it turns from all these surrounding nations, and then it hits Judah. Ooh, now it's getting close. And then it hits Israel, and it'll stay on Israel for a while. And a number of the guys that I was reading, commentators I was reading, they were saying how all along the way in the opening 20-some verses, Israel's thinking, that's right, go get them.
Amen.
They need to hear it.
Preach.
Yeah, until it hits a little too close to home for them. So.
All right. Well, is there any other applications? Again, it's good to stay faithful to this was a specific pastoral message to, Israel, to a specific people in a specific time of history, in a specific location, but we feel like God uses the scriptures alive and it's active, and so it can speak into even our life if we're not that people in that location in that specific time. Is there any others that you felt like now that you've had more time to kind of meditate on it?
I would also add, and I mentioned this a few times, the nations of the world would do well to pay heed. I said that during the service a few times. And then I added, including the United States. Our nation now, 2020, is reckoning with its past problems and sins. We like to think, even if that sin didn't carry over to the present. So let's say that, slavery was dealt with in the 1860s and everything was wonderful from then on. Everybody was treated greatly and everything was perfect. We're still dealing with the consequences of those actions for the first couple hundred years of the nation, even though we're now almost 180 years later. And then certainly the injustices that continued on, sometimes government sanctioned, or at the very least just sort of overlooked. I think those things are coming to a day of reckoning as well today. And look, we need to deal with it. The nation needs to deal with it. Individuals need to deal with it. Communities need to deal with it. Churches, in some cases, need to deal with it. And I can't remember the quote. I mentioned it to you before in the past that I believe it was Ben Franklin. It was at the Constitutional Convention. They were trying to figure out, okay, what's the nation going to be like? What it's going to look like? We're trying to form this new government and so on. And Franklin, who was probably close to 40 years older than anybody else in the room, 50, 60 years older than some of the guys that were in the room, he just sort of, in a very fatherly way, explained to the people that were there that individuals, for our sins, we're judged in the next life. We'll have our day of judgment, which is a basic understanding of life and death and judgment and so on. And he said, but nations, they don't have that opportunity. They're judged in this life. And his point that he was getting at was we need to, as a new nation that is being birthed, be a nation that won't be judged later on, and to work those things into our law. And I'm pretty sure, the more I'm talking about it right now, I'm pretty sure it was in the context of whether this nation would have slavery or not, because there were a lot of people really pushing for no slavery, and then obviously the southern states were pushing to keep it. And Franklin, from sort of one of the middle colonies, middle states, tried to form this sort of bridge between the two, knowing that judgment will come for injustice. So, a little bit of a ramble.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, no, not a ramble. It was good. More heavy than ramble.
Sorry. Okay,
yeah.
good. But as I look at all these other nations being judged, somebody has said this that God's going to need to go back and apologize to these other nations if America isn't judged. And I think God has blessed America. I think America has had a very unique place in the history of the world for such a time as this. I do think that God, and I know that God has used the United States of America to propel the gospel forth throughout the world. But America's not a Christian nation, certainly not any longer. And there is sin in our nation, and it's allowed to thrive in our nation, and it's promoted throughout our nation. And again, maybe not by the official government, though we light up the White House in rainbow, but just in the people that make up this nation. And it's going to have a day of reckoning, just like all these other nations had to have a day of reckoning.
Well, light stuff for this week.
Yeah, continuing the conversation and starting many new ones.
Yes. But Jeannie, thank you for that sweet testimony. That's awesome. And so asking you guys that are watching to consider how the Lord's using Amos in your life and consider how a good way to share that would be, so others can see the Lord at work.
Yeah.
So be blessed this week, and we will see you soon.
Amen. Bye now.